In a revitalized Jacksonville journey, the Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Florida is flourishing. There's possibly more recognition coming to the local group than ever before, including the achievements of this new high school graduate.
Me being 18, doing this at a young age, now that I'm going to college into the real world, this prepares me for the future.
Caleb Riggin shares his story, and we learn more about how the Boys and Girls Club is making a difference beyond the classrooms of local schools. A week of unrest and civil protest. What can we make of the interaction between city and state officials in California pushing back against assistance from the National Guard and U.S. military on This Week in Jacksonville? Thanks so much for joining us today. As of our time to record this interview, leaders in California are still pushing back against President Donald Trump's move to federalize the state's National Guard and to deploy hundreds of Marines. News4Jax political analyst Rick Melany here to join us and talk through some of these issues at play here. And Rick, as I'm thinking about this, as these demonstrations continue spreading, they're not just in L.A. We've seen them in San Antonio, Chicago, other places. We've got a member of the president's cabinet also suggesting that these National Guard orders could extend to other states. So it's a big topic here and something that even this week we've heard a lot of interest in. People are really wondering what's playing out here.
Kent, it's a really big topic, and I think we have to back up from the deployment of troops and say, what is the real issue here? And it really comes down to something that is a signature issue for Donald Trump. 10 years ago, when he first came down the escalator, over the past decade, if you were to ask what is the most significant signature issue for Donald Trump, it's this. And in his campaign, he said—
meaning immigration?
Immigration.
Okay,
immigration is the issue, and in particular, security on the border, but also, and here's this issue, the deportation of illegal immigrants. And that's what these ICE raids are all about. Remember how this protest started, and that was a week ago Friday when the Trump administration, ICE, did some raids in Los Angeles, and that's when you had your original protesters, about 800 of them, and then the very next day there was the deployment of the National Guard. So when you talked earlier about what's spreading around the country and the protest, a lot of the protest are the ICE raids themselves, and there's a fundamental policy difference here. The mayor in Los Angeles, Mayor Bass, has said, hey, we can end this, stop the raids. Donald Trump ran for president on, I'm going to do the raids. We are going to engage in this deportation. I think some of the deportation of illegal immigrants is easy, and that's if they've committed a crime, if they have a criminal record, and if a judge has imposed an order for them to be deported. However, there are those illegal immigrants that have been here lawfully and legally for a number of years. They're employed, they have families. You saw some of those workplace raids in Los Angeles, and that gets very emotional. So I think the context here is really important. Donald Trump, during the second term, has not been shy about pushing executive power, and he's doing it on deportation and immigration also. All
right, so from a legal standpoint, take me to mobilizing the National Guard. The governor of the state of California says that's our job to do, not yours. Where do we stand on this?
It is really rare to see the deployment of the National Guard without the request or certainly the approval of the governor. It's been more than half a century since you've seen that happen here in this country. And what happened here, of course, is that Donald Trump made the determination that under Title 10, by the way, and there's two different legal provisions that he can use, because remember this, in general, the military is not to be used for the enforcement of domestic laws, nor the National Guard, who are federalized here. But Donald Trump points to Title 10, and among its provisions is to enforce federal laws to overcome a rebellion, and he feels that's what's happening. There's a second provision, the Insurrection Act of 1807, that has been used, but pretty sparingly. You have to go back to Lyndon Johnson and John Kennedy and Eisenhower when you're dealing with desegregation and also civil rights issues to invoke that. And so Donald Trump has been cautious not to do that just yet. And the Marines so far that have been deployed have been for the security of federal buildings and personnel, and the state of California, in their arguments before the court, have recognized that he can certainly do that. But you have to see how this plays out. Does this go further? Do you cross the line into Marines, the actual military, being used in the enforcement of these laws? And that's a real big issue.
Well, and one of the things we saw this week, I think we got video of the Marines in L.A., even leaders of the military saying, well, you know, we're not trained for non-lethal detention of people. Marines, soldiers, they're trained to fight in war. So even here, it was kind of strange to see, like right here, where you see them working out, okay, how do we, in a non-lethal way, just subdue someone or assist? I think what they're talking about is trying to assist law enforcement do their job. This seems really strange.
It's not only strange, it's close to unprecedented. We have had circumstances, very serious circumstances, but the whole notion of the United States military being used for the enforcement of domestic laws or being used in cities is something we don't want to see. It has to be an extraordinary circumstance. And the argument of Governor Newsom and the argument of Mayor Bass is that they have local law enforcement, that they've established a curfew, they brought in forces, and that they can handle us. But there is a big difference in Los Angeles and California as a sanctuary city and a sanctuary state versus Donald Trump's approach to deportation issues. So that's going to play into this. But I think we need to lower the temperature, de-escalate what's going on. We do not want to see this spreading to other states, but you certainly see a very contentious in Los Angeles.
Well, and let me talk about some of the local component here. Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan now sharing her thoughts on the city's new immigration bill. It passed Tuesday night at City Council with a vote of 11-8. The bill calls for Deegan's office to hand over a list of federal grants and any DEI practices and policies. It would also disclose the number of undocumented immigrants, if any, living in public housing under the city's control. Demonstrators gathered outside City Hall on Tuesday night. They were protesting the bill and calling for council to focus instead on affordable housing and infrastructure improvements. Mayor Deegan's office issued a short statement regarding her thoughts on the bill. A spokesperson shared this. Mayor Deegan has concerns about the bill. She will be reviewing it and weighing all her options. So News4Jax. We also spoke with an immigration attorney, Rebecca Black. She opposes the bill, and she says this diverts resources from real crime.
I think it's duplicative of legislation that's already in play by the state of Florida that's already being sued. I think it's just a lot of political grandstanding where people just want to stand there and be able to say, yes, we're strong with the president against immigration. But the reality is a lot of it is stuff that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office has already been able to do.
Legal experts say that this bill may still face legal challenges. Also still unclear whether or not Mayor Deegan would sign the bill into law. But Rick, as you just heard me say, the mayor said got concerns about this here locally.
Well, interesting, Kent. There is this partisan divide that we talk about a lot, and a difference between blue states and red states, and blue cities and red cities. And in Florida so far, you really have not seen the kinds of challenges you've seen in California, or that you're seeing somewhat in Illinois and now New York. I don't expect you're going to see that in Florida because of a different approach, this red state approach. And this bill is consistent with a fairly strong approach when it comes to immigration and DEI and deportation.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you. That's one topic. We've got more. There's been a lot of debate in Washington, D.C. over what the president calls his big, beautiful bill, wrapping tax cuts and other policies into one piece of legislation. Mr. Melany stays with us, and we're going to break that down next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Thanks for staying with us today. So in late May, the U.S. House passed President Trump's big, beautiful bill. It's a 1,000-page piece of legislation that wraps together tax breaks and spending cuts, also makes some cuts to Medicaid and food stamps, and wraps in other policy issues like artificial intelligence. The president says he wants it on his desk by July 4th. The bill's still facing a battle in the Senate, though. News4Jax political analyst, director of the JU Public Policy Institute, Rick Melany, still with us today. One of the things that is interesting, the House pushed this through, and the Senate saying, well, because there's a Republican majority in the Senate, but it's pretty thin.
It's very thin, and Kent, one of the things to keep an eye on is you could see a very different bill going back to the House, and remember, it only passed the House by one vote. In the end, I believe something is going to pass, but the bill may look different than it does right now. I'm not so sure they make that July 4th deadline, but remember, they will be using this process known as reconciliation, meaning there's going to be no filibuster in the Senate. They simply need a majority in the Senate, but even there, they only have a 3-person margin, so this will be close. Expect it to pass, but there's lots and lots and lots of work to be done on this bill.
Well, one of the key figures in this on the Senate side is Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky. I just met him in January for the very first time, but he's somebody who's in the party, but been a little bit critical here. And it looks like maybe this week there's a little more coming together between Senator Paul and the White House.
There is, but Senator Paul is one of a number of Republicans, especially the spending hawks, that are taking a look at this bill. And according to the projections of the CBO, and that's the one that's used oftentimes, although criticized by the Republicans, and others have come to the same projection of increasing the debt by 2.4 trillion. For many Republicans, this is a big, big issue, rightfully so. For Elon Musk, he talked about the 37 trillion we're in debt. The whole impetus behind Doge was spending and the debt and the deficit, cutting, and something had to be done. And so for many of those Republicans in the Senate and the House, this bill doesn't appear to go far enough. And Ron Paul has been one of those people, has been one of those ones critical of the bill.
A couple of weeks ago on our show, we had Congressman John Rutherford, who said, hey, the CBO scores this as increasing the debt, but I don't believe it. I think that's wrong. Look back at 8 years ago and what we did in the first term for President Trump. How does someone know really what's going to happen in the future? You've got to have some projections somewhere about what the impact will be.
Well, underlying it, and this is really an important part of this bill, one of the defining parts of the bill is the tax issue, and it relates to the scoring. This year, if the Congress does nothing, the 2017 Trump tax cuts will expire. And Republicans argue that that's a $4 trillion tax increase. So what this bill does in part is it extends the Trump tax cuts from 2017. That's pretty significant, and that gets scored different by the CBO than it does by some Republicans. But what Donald Trump has done is he's added to that. It's not just the extension of those tax cuts. On the campaign trail, he promised no tax on tips, for example. That's in this bill. He promised no tax on overtime. That's in this bill. He promised no tax on Social Security. That's not in this bill. But for many Republicans, they're taking a look at these cuts and they're asking where are the tax cuts, but then they're looking to the spending side. Increased spending that you've seen for defense and for the border, but then you've seen decreased spending when it comes to some of the social safety networks such as Medicaid, with the work requirements. Now, the Republicans argue that's not a cut. Democrats characterize it very differently. So there's a lot of changes I think you're going to see from the Senate side. In the end, the Republicans will have to come together. It's a very thin margin. But front and center are the tax cuts. And front and center is how do you grade those tax cuts and its impact on the deficit.
How important is this for the president and his agenda?
It's fundamental to Donald Trump. You've seen in his second term, by the way, he hasn't been especially fond of going to Congress. You've seen him push the limits of executive power without Congress. That's been true on tariffs. That's been true when it comes to law firms. That's been true in higher ed. We talked about that's been true in immigration. But clearly, when it comes to appropriations, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to spending, he can't do that through executive order. He has got to go to Congress. And his campaign pledges on the taxes and on spending are wrapped up in this bill. That's why he calls it one big, beautiful bill. That's not the characterization of Democrats. So the answer to your question, this is important for Donald Trump and his agenda.
And so just remind us the process. The House already passed it, but now it's with the Senate. And if they make changes, got to go back to the House.
Has to go back to the House. The House and the Senate are going to have to agree. That's why I'm saying I'm not so sure about this July 4th deadline. I do think the Senate will make some changes. In the end, because of the reconciliation process, you're going to see it pass in the Senate, and they'll all have to come together. There is some contention there. There's lots of tax issues we didn't talk about, such as SALT and that deductions for state and local taxes in some places around the country. Big substantive discussions on this bill, Kent. Long way to go, but in the end, despite, I think, some drama we can expect, I think in the end the bill gets passed. It may not look quite like it looks today.
Only about a minute left, but go ahead and explain that. SALT, state and local taxes. So what's proposed in passed in the House was a $40,000 SALT cap. Maybe explain that for folks before we go.
It used to be in blue states, of course, who have state income taxes and maybe higher property taxes. They had that as a deduction on their federal income taxes. The Republicans started to do away with that deduction, saying, hey, we're subsidizing blue states, such as in particular New York, California, Illinois. And so they put a cap on how much you could deduct on your state income taxes, on your property taxes, on your sales taxes, which we have here in Florida, and instead they raised the standard deduction. So what you've seen since 2017, people watching this program may be a part of this, they used to itemize their deductions, now they're taking the standard deduction.
Right. Because it's higher.
Because it's higher. It made it simpler. It made it a little bit higher, but it also saved a little bit of money. But there's been big pushback, particularly out of New York and Illinois and other states, to say, hey, that deduction for state and local taxes, we want back in there. So as a compromise in the House, they took it from its $10,000 cap to a $40,000 cap, and we go back to that earlier discussion. What is the impact on the debt? What does that mean for our annual deficits? Many Republicans believe it increases the deficit. They'd like to reduce it. But if you're from those blue states and your constituents, they want that tax deduction.
Rick, I appreciate it too. Really big topics, and we got a lot of information in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, so stay with us, and ahead, an enlightening conversation with a young man who is going places and just got back from a regional competition in Atlanta. The Youth of the Year from the Boys and Girls Club in the state of Florida. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
The Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Florida is making a big impact on local youth, helping teens like Caleb Riggins develop leadership skills and pursue their dreams. With 59 clubs serving more than 6,000 kids this summer, the organization offers more than just after-school programming. I got a tour from Caleb, and I spoke to the group's chief operating officer to find out more. From literacy initiatives to career exploration, they're creating opportunities in communities that need support most.
Yes, sir. So as of April of 2 months ago, I have the privilege of being the newly State of Florida Youth of the Year, and we fly out Tuesday for Atlanta, Georgia to compete in the Southeast Regional Youth of the Year competition.
All right, and so that's several states to be that
Yes,
region.
sir.
in the
Nine
Southeast.
total.
Nine states.
Yes, sir.
What does the competition look like? And you've already gone through this to earn the statewide recognition.
So this competition, each level gets a little bit harder, a little bit tedious, but these skills and these competitions prepare us for the future. So for Youth of the Year, you have to submit a three minute speech, and then you have to do three essays, boys and girls experience, what matters to you most, and your personal experience throughout the club, just so the judges can get to know you before you do your interview. Then that comes the hard part. You have to recite this 3-minute speech in front of a panel of judges, and sometimes it's 3, 4, this time it's 9, and then you have to get interviewed for an increment of 20 minutes. During this whole process, yes, it can be stressful, but as teenagers going through this process, talking to young adults and advocating for our communities, it helps us become individuals that learn how to advocate and speak up for the voiceless and speak up for the unheard. So me being 18, doing this at a young age, now I'm going to college into the real world, just prepares me for the future.
Tell me that experience. What hooked you in? Because you didn't initially say, I better look into Boys and Girls Club.
Yes, sir. So actually, our National Youth of the Year for this year, Nico Flowers, he's from Edward H. White High School too, and he's from the same site. And he's a good friend of mine. So actually, he's a barber now. He was cutting hair at the Boys and Girls Club. I met him in anatomy class at 9th grade. It was one of my first few weeks of high school. I was nervous. I was shy. He was one of the first kids I met. I needed a haircut. And Nico said, come to the Boys and Girls Club. I'll give you a free haircut. The moment I heard free, I said, I gotta go. So little did I know, he kind of was persuading me to join the club and get in the barbershop program. So I thought I was just gonna be a haircut and that's it. But for many young men in America, the barbershop is a safe space for men and brotherhood. So when I joined the Boys and Girls Club and got a haircut, it was more than just a haircut. I found brotherhood. I found people that I can actually call my brothers and siblings because I'm only child. So I don't have nobody at home. It's just me and my mom. So the Boys and Girls Club, it kind of showed me a sense of community, a sense of family, people that I meet that will show me unconditional love, support, and guidance everywhere I go.
Yeah. So Nico gave you the haircut and the pitch and invited you in, and you said yes. So what did those years mean to you, and what are you taking now that you're a high school graduate? What are you taking with you as you move on in your life?
So some of the core values that I learned in the club is leadership, responsibility, respect. As a leader in the community, as a Keystone President out of Youth of the Year, I now know what it means to speak up, advocate, be a voice for the voiceless. They taught me a sense of responsibility. If that's balancing my academic achievements or extracurricular activities by playing sports, or just volunteering or being a community advocate in the community of Jacksonville, or simply just learning respect in the club, treating others with the same respect that I want to be treated with, and creating a lasting impact everywhere I go. These same values have instilled me with responsibility, respect, leadership, things that I will take into my young adulthood. So when I'm in college, I'm better off, and I will lean on these values to help me out to my adulthood.
What's your pitch to this 9-judge panel or what have you in Atlanta? What's the reason that you should be the Regional Youth of the Year?
The reason why I should be the Regional Youth of the Year is because I understand the value of determination, understanding that your past does not define you. A little background about my mother, she's actually an immigrant, and I'm a first-generation immigrant. She's all the way from Angola, Africa. She immigrated to the United States in 1999, not for herself, but for the greater good of sacrifice so I could have better opportunities. And she gave me a second chance on living and having better opportunities in America. I now know what it means to sacrifice, go through hard times, yeah, sometimes life will get hard and the devil will throw curveballs, but I'm deeply rooted in my faith and I trust God that things have to get done, not for myself, but for the greater good of my generation and my community.
You've been practicing that to share with them, or that just comes up because you've told so many people what the impact has been of Boys and Girls Club?
Because of the Boys and Girls Club, I met so many people. For example, I know Sheriff T.K. Waters. I know the new president of the city councilman, Kevin Carrico. I met so many people, even Trayvon Walker, a Jaguars player. I met so many people that just ask me about who I am, that pour into kids just like me in the Boys and Girls Club. So it kind of prepares us for the future. And recently I spoke about that self-confidence that I have in myself. The Boys and Girls Club instills confidence in me that I'm not scared to tell my story and I'm not scared to tell where I came from.
Lots of positive news for Boys and Girls Club of America. BGCA was named a top 10 charity by Forbes and continues to rank as the leading youth-serving organization nationally. Most recently, Boys and Girls Clubs of Northeast Florida named a top 10 club in the nation for overall participation based on the 2024 annual report. All right, next time, we're going to have a conversation with Kevin Carrico. He's been elected to lead Jacksonville City Council as president beginning July 1st. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17 and online at newsforjax.com. We're streaming on News for Jax Plus. And before we go, don't forget to check out This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. This week's episode of our podcast looks at critical preparation for hurricane season when it comes to your property. That's news for homeowners and business owners alike. You'll find new episodes every Thursday at 9 a.m. You're going to find it right now on News for Jax Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.